Welcome to this morning's edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you with us here on NoFilter.net and the variety of platforms and affiliates associated that carry this program. Many years I was doing sports talk, I would say over 40 years doing sports talk, mostly in South Florida. I did some national stuff here and there and worked in other cities as well prior to that. But one of the standard fillers was, and this would come up whenever you were completely out of material, you would get into a Hall of Fame eligibility. Does he belong? Does he not belong? Should he get in? First ballot, unanimous? Those Hall of Fame debates. And of course, the classic one was always going to be Pete Rose and whether or not Pete Rose belonged in the Hall of Fame. Now, the logic would certainly validate the position that, yes, he is a Hall of Famer from productivity, from any kind of performance figures that you were going to look at. He's Charlie Hustle, for God's sake. Belongs in the Hall of Fame. Played the game as well, as hard as anybody ever did. Of course, we know, and this is relatable to a lot of people out there in the audience, I'm sure, and the viewers and listeners to the program. We know that he was also a sick, degenerate gambler. I mean, this guy would bet on two roaches crossing the sink and wager a couple of sticks, maybe even a few dimes, on which one was going to get to the drain first or pop out of there first. We'd seen Pete Rose in evidence in gambling because he used to hang around racetracks here in the state of Florida. He was at Tampa Bay Downs when his team was training in St. Petersburg all the time. First flash would come on the board. A horse that was 6-1 in the morning line would be 1-20, and you would see $10,000 in the win pool. And that was the only money that had been bet. And of course, it came right out of the pocket in the bankroll of one Pete Rose because he was very much heavily involved in all forms of degenerate gambling, and no doubt the reports were very accurate that he was betting. Look, I don't know if he went to the extreme when he was managing of bringing some guy out of the bullpen like Pedro Barbone. His arm is dragging on the ground like an orangutan because he went 3 innings the day before, but Pete needed somehow to cover an over. He's got a 15-3 lead and wants to make sure the other team gets like 6 runs in this inning. Did he do stuff like that? I don't know. But as a Hall of Famer, credentials, certainly in. Another one of my favorites is Joe Willie Namath. I was a huge Joe Willie fan. And I think his role in bringing about, whether you want to see this as symbolic or actual tangible evidence that were it not for the win in Super Bowl III, which was a veritable impossibility, Don Shula went to his grave, never getting over that. I knew Don Shula personally, and you would bring up Super Bowl III, and he was like, "Hey, can we talk about something else, kid? I like you," but he didn't really talk like that. Responsible largely for the merger and what we have today, that is the monster entity of the National Football League. So does he belong in the Hall of Fame on his statistics? Yeah, he completed barely over 50% of his passes. He threw a couple of thousand picks. He also was performing at a time, if you're familiar with the swirling winds of Shea, if you ever attended a ball game there, I mean, it was not an easy place to throw the ball 55 yards down the field in the air under a pass rush while George Sauer and Don Maynard were getting mauled by Atkinson and Fred the Hammer Williamson and all of these defensive backs that literally, if you ran an out pattern and you were going to go up the field, they were allowed to stick a knife in your back. And there was no flag. You didn't see flags flying like it was the United Nations back in that day. So is he a Hall of Famer? Yeah, in my opinion, a surefire Hall of Famer. But that debate's always interesting because you have the detractors and there are many people around the country that despise anything to do with the New York Jets. And they would call in and say, "Hey, what are you talking about, DeForrest? You're out of your mind. This guy doesn't belong in there." Then we had the juicers and all kinds of different controversies. Right now, whether Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer is a subject of debate. And so he has the criteria that a lot of people go by. He's got a couple of championships, but there were many years where you were looking at Eli Manning on the field and you're thinking, that's a long way, Eli, from a Hall of Fame considerable performance. And so it was an average or above average quarterback for a long period of time. He was in a spot. He performed very well. Was MVP of both of those games. Does that make him a Hall of Famer? Part of the debates. But nobody could debate whether Ichiro is a first ballot Hall of Famer, which he became yesterday, and how this was not a unanimous. I mean, I was always nervous when you used to see these Manson parole hearings, and you were nervous that maybe one of the California parole board members would kind of be nodding off and then just rubber stamp it and say, "Yeah, let him out." What kind of a schmuck do you have to be to leave Ichiro off your Hall of Fame balloting. I would imagine much of today will be spent in high anxiety by reporters out there trying to figure out which one of these ink-stained wretches said that, in his opinion, Ichiro, with 3,089 hits, lifetime Major League Baseball average after he already had a brilliant career in Japan of 311, dynamite fielder. I mean, in the class of maybe, what was he up there with Roberto Clemente among right fielders? Maybe. And you don't even have him on the ballot. Unbelievable that this guy, whether you thought that he was number one of the eligible players that were on the ballot this year, and three guys got in: CC Sabathia and Billy Wagner, the ace reliever. Man, he had some wicked stuff and some high velocity. But whoever this guy is, and I don't know. I mean, it might be a female, but whoever had the voting rights and the opportunity to vote for the Hall of Fame left Ichiro off the ballot. I mean, you would have to say that this guy is a class one idiot and doesn't deserve to vote ever again. All right, now if you aren't betting, and there are many things, many props out there that we can bet on here today. We did hit one yesterday with Scotty M. He came through like a champ. He gave us a point and a half against SMU college hoops here on the show. Scotty M. And not only did they cover the point and a half, but they trounced SMU on the road. So that was a pretty astute pick. If you're betting, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From all of the earliest odds to the in-game live betting, which is very popular now. I talked about it yesterday. Little epiphany. I think I'm going to have to switch off the old school shit that I've been doing and just go full bore into the Gen X in-game betting because I feel like I have some instincts for that. We may bury you instead of the bookie, so we subscribe to this in the future. They provide you with the ability to watch the games, the largest selection of odds on virtually everything. Bet online. The game starts here. Let us bring in, and it's always a pleasure. You, I would imagine, would have a strong opinion on this, hailing from the great city of Seattle. And a place I've never been, but I'm going to assume it's a great city because any place where as soon as you step off the plane, they hit you in the face with a fish. You got to like them. Ichiro, what kind of is there any logic behind a guy retaining his voting position for the Baseball Hall of Fame if you left Ichiro off your ballot? How did the city of Seattle react to that? Not that he got in, he got every vote but one. Who is this guy, Trey Weston? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, that was the talk of the town yesterday, my friend. The talk of the town. I think the overall consensus was that this was a personal vendetta against Ichiro. More on the personality traits. Maybe these guys, had an argument over a martini. But these guys, it was a debacle. It's sad because you look at the guys that got unanimous votes all the way in. It was sad to see, like you said, Ichiro more than deserving to be unanimous. And you wonder, I'll be honest, a lot of the radio guys out here, they want to get the guy that didn't vote for him on the show and find out what the hell happened. Because like you said, absolutely ridiculous. But like you said, he's in. But people are not happy about it out here in Seattle. It's the talk of the town.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean it's happened before too. I forget players, but that had this happen. And then I guess Derek Jeter was not a unanimous vote.
Hmm.
Some people would speculate, well, they were in a conspiracy together because they didn't want to have a unanimous guy or whatever. That seems ridiculous, also. But I would imagine, I mean, some Rick Riley type of writer, maybe just to put the spotlight on himself. You would think that he would openly and defiantly come on these shows.
True.
And then this is very popular in America. Just look at the political scene right now, Trey West. I don't know how heavily involved you are in that because fortunately for you, you're so immersed in your business that you probably don't have to worry about what's going on in the world there, unless we all have to start speaking Russian. But uh, I mean, if how could you possibly have thought for a second that this was something that would make you anything but the ultimate of a disgrace, and yet that's a popular position to put yourself in, though. So
Exactly. That's
yeah,
exactly
you
right. That's
cash in
exactly.
big going around campaigning and saying that, hey, look, the guy wasn't all that great, huh? That was a classic. But I used to love that. I used to love Hall of Fame debates because there's really no great answer to it. And it was typical sports talk fodder there, where you could come up with virtually anything and end up okay. All right, well, where are you putting your focus and concentration these days? Because we do have the two football games coming up. A lot of interesting things surrounding that. If you were a believer that the Commanders are going to win it all somehow, you're getting what 7-1 on them to win the Super Bowl. You're getting like plus 750 on Jaden Daniels, who you would have to think coincidental to the Commanders winning the Super Bowl if they did it, that he would be the MVP. I mean, it would be unlikely it would be somebody else. So you might be able to throw that in as just a given. And then you have any number of other propositions relating to the Commanders at long odds, including the combination of who they might beat. Do you give them any shot of winning the whole thing?
If they got to it, I think they actually would have a shot. I think their biggest hurdle is actually going to be going into Philly, and I think the reason why is more the climate. I mean, this team plays a lot better on turf. You saw it in Detroit. They're a fast-paced, up-tempo team. Jaden Daniels, not to say he can't play in cold weather. I know Washington's not the glamorous of climates, but if you look at his track record throughout at least this year and even into college a little bit, this guy's used to playing in better weather. So if he's going to go out and play in 30 degrees, I don't see the Commanders being able to out physical and outmatch Philadelphia. Yes, I get it. They beat them, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Philadelphia. Sort of a fluky game if you go back and watch that. But I think if this is a cold game, if there's snow involved, like we saw against the Rams on Sunday, I do think the Commanders struggle. Now, if they somehow pull it off, I do think the Buffalo Bills or the Kansas City Chiefs are vulnerable, and we've seen it with Buffalo's defense throughout the year. They're capable of giving up 30 to 40 plus points. And Kansas City, as good as they've been this year, they've laid several clunkers and got away with it. So if they could get through Philadelphia, which again I don't think they will, they have a real chance.
And it's interesting too, because now you're saying kind of like in the movie Let It Ride with Richard Dreyfuss, a great movie about the racetrack. And as soon as the tout came over and told him who he liked in the third race, one guy after another, he would say, "Okay," to his comrade there, put a line through that one. So we're putting a line through the Commanders, according to Troy West's theories, and so that leaves us. And you're saying defensively, both Buffalo and Kansas City are vulnerable. Does that sound like a lean towards where the rest of the world is going, and slight favoritism for the Philadelphia Eagles to win it all?
I think my personal opinion, we're gonna get Buffalo and we're gonna get Philadelphia. And I think in that game, I would not have an opinion. I really wouldn't. I mean, Josh Allen is playing at an all time high right now. Their defense actually looked pretty good against Baltimore last week. But boy, you and I, Defo, we both know this is a week to week league. Every week seems so different. Again, they're going into Kansas City. That's been their kryptonite. Can they get the job done this go around? I just have not been. It's just so crazy to say this. I have not been impressed with the Kansas City Chiefs this year. The record speaks for itself. Mahomes' stats have been down. Travis Kelsey did have a good game finally last week. It looked like he was back from the dead. Maybe just was holding out for the playoffs. But there's just so much going on. If it became like I said, I think it's going to be Buffalo Philly, and I think that line probably comes out around a pick'em game, and I wouldn't have a very strong opinion on that one.
Did you ever look at this angle? And there are people that do, and I guess there's a site that points out the records of officials when they're involved in officiating
Oh yeah.
games with certain teams. It's especially prevalent, and I think a factor for a lot of NBA handicappers,
Yep.
where they realize that certain officials, it's almost staggering to see that some teams never win when certain guys are out there on the court. Do you track that at all? Because we were speculating that maybe Tim Donaghy would come back from his days as an NBA ref and be part of the officiating crew here to ensure that Patrick Mahomes got all of the favorable calls. How much of an irritant is that to you when you're watching a game and you have money on the other team? I mean, what is? Are you emotional about this kind of stuff, Troy West? You start firing stuff at the screens in the sports books you're in.
Gosh, when you gamble as much as I have, you have a lot of stuff go your way and a lot of stuff not go your way. So you try to stay even keeled. But yeah, I mean, with guys like Patrick Mahomes and LeBron James and a lot of these guys, I truly believe that the refs go to the game not necessarily to fix the game, but I also feel like they have this. They want to be friends with those guys. They don't want to cost them a championship or cost them a game, so they're extra cautious on how they're going to call it. And we've seen it with Patrick Mahomes, right? So I think those guys, like I said, when they go into that game, their mindset is, man, I really don't want to screw this guy. I don't want to be the talk of the town, making this guy lose the game. So then you almost see them overcompensate and make calls, boneheaded calls for the other side of the team.
It's funny too. I can't help having been in a zillion race books and sports books in my lifetime, mostly betting on simulcast racing. And you always see that one guy that's like Mr. Chalk that's betting every 2 to 5 shot, and he's screaming for him. And then finally, he's been losing race after race, and he gets down to the bottom of his bankroll, and you hear him yelling at the top of his lungs, and he's standing right in front of the giant projection screens, and almost like a silhouette there on the screen as you're watching these horses run, and you go, "Come on with that toe! Come on with that toe! Come on with that toe! Come on, oh you fucking pig!" And then he like fires the program at the screen as if I mean that was going to somehow give him some level of satisfaction that he got his money's worth out of losing that bet. Yeah, I mean you can see this happening where people are going to get very very frustrated with a couple of these games. Are you diving into college basketball? Scotty M came up with a beauty yesterday with Louisville playing good basketball, had some logic behind it, cited some numerology. It was very impressive, and they crushed like a grape SMU on the road. Have you been seeing any tendencies there, or teams that you've latched onto, even from a total standpoint, that you've been able to embrace with confidence?
Gosh, you can almost bet the Alabama and Kentucky's over every week, and you're going to come out okay. The college basketball this year is more wide open than ever. I really believe that. Obviously you've got the Tennessees and the Auburns are kind of your first class. Florida's probably right in there as well. But those teams are vulnerable. We've seen them lose, and we've seen them lose bad. We focus primarily, we really do. We focus on the West Coast WCC conference. You've got Gonzaga in there, Washington State, Santa Clara. We really know those teams inside now. We do cover the Big Ten with Washington being in there, UCLA, Wisconsin. Big Ten's got a lot of good teams, but this year more than ever, it is wide, wide open. It really is. I'm looking forward to seeing this March Madness tournament. I think we're going to see more madness than ever. You've got some of the smaller town schools like the Drakes of the world that are starting to play really good basketball that could potentially make deep runs come tournament time. So no, we're dialed in and we're loving it. And I think we're in for a very special March Madness tournament this year.
All right. Any look at any college games we can embrace in the near future? Have you got something picked out for today?
I do. I like St. John's. They're at home today, 16-3, 7-1 in the conference. They're -7.5 at home against Xavier. This St. John's team, they play much, much better at home. Xavier not as good on the road. Sean Miller's really got to get that team playing better on the road. That's one that I do like. TCU, very suspect line today. They're getting 6.5 at home against Kansas. You would think that line would be higher. That's that old give me the home dog with the TCU and the Horned Frogs. That one just looked juicy. I understand Kansas playing better basketball, but TCU, anytime you get that weird home dog number, I'd love to take that. And then another one for you is Cleveland State. I know, I get it. The Horizon Conference. Cleveland State -14.5 at home against Detroit Mercy. Cleveland State's actually a good 14-6, 8-1. That's a team you might see win that conference and be in the tournament. They're going to handle business as well today. So those are three college games that I've had circled for you.
I didn't even know if you had prepared anything on that. And of course, you're diving in and plunging with both fists, which is great. We love St. John's, of course. Rick Pitino's our guy. And anybody that threw down a chick on a small table in a restaurant, Italian restaurant in Louisville, and survived it all. The marriage stayed together, got out of this treacherous relationship there where he was being, having people, trying to hold him up for money. And that was great. And he turns out he's a delightful guy and a horse racing degenerate. He owned racehorses, and we see him around the track here and there, and couldn't be any better of a guy. So we're happy for his success, especially in a year where the great Luke Carnesecca checked out. So maybe there's a certain aura and maybe a good omen that's hovering over this St. John's program. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this 7.5 against Xavier with you, Tri West. All right, let's get into some thoughts on these two pro football games, how you see them coming out, where your money's going to be going, and starting with, and let's face it. I mean, the Ravens. If you pick the Ravens in that game and put your money on them -1, could you be considered a raving lunatic? No, because they were right there. Mark Andrews, the last guy on earth, you figure is going to drop a pass like that. and it's holy Jackie Smith. There he is, laying down on the ground there in the end zone. Now, the conditions were a little awkward, but that guy makes that catch. If he'd thrown the ball another 999 times, he makes it every time. And there'll be critics of Lamar Jackson saying that he's a Bunsen burner for cash. Many degenerates despise Lamar Jackson, including a good friend of mine who you can't even begin to utter what he had to say about Lamar Jackson as a clutch player in the postseason. But I don't know that you can blame him because he kind of rallied the team. That being said, so Buffalo a little bit lucky to survive that one, and now they go on the road and face the Chiefs, which I'm with you. I mean, this 15-2, and you can discount the last game because they just tanked it, but and didn't play anybody. But at 15-1 in a 16 game season, when it supposedly mattered, that was the funkiest 15-1 I've ever seen. They could have just as easily. You could always say this because the nature of the beast in all sports now is to have razor tight games, and but you could hardly. I mean, you could have easily seen them losing 4 or 5 games this year. No,
No, absolutely, and I hate being that guy because I've done that with the Chiefs the last couple of years, and look what's happened.
yeah.
They play good defense. They're well coached, and they seem to rise up every time there's a big game, and every time there's a big play that needs to be happened, they make it happen. Um, this weekend, I get the viewers out there. I get it. This isn't the sexy way to do it. Some people don't like laying the extra juice, but these have been really good to us over the year. Is the classic 7 point teaser. A lot of books out there. They're still going to give you minus 130 or minus 140 juice, but I'm loving taking that Buffalo Bills line up to 9 and taking that Eagles line down to a pick 'em. I think that's where the real money's at. I do think Buffalo goes in there and wins that football game. I think they're the better overall football team. They've got the better run game. Josh Allen's playing good football. Call me crazy. I've seen some very sharp money come in on Kansas City. We saw the 1.4 million go down. I know people with well over six figures on Kansas
Oh,
City. But I think the Buffalo Bills win that game. And then the other game, I do think the Eagles win 6.5. I see the official number now. That's creeping up. The Commanders, can they go on the road? I get it. They went on the road to Detroit, that much different environment than going on the road in Philly. I don't think it's going to snow. I'm looking at the weather right now, 40 degrees, still cold. Can Jaden Daniels beat the Eagles for a second time in a row? I don't see that happening. I do think it's going to be a closer game. That 6.5 would scare me, but I would probably take the Eagles 28-22.
all right, very good. So you like the Buffalo Bills to prevail in that game? Many of your friends. What's the highest bridge in Seattle? Will they be
Nobody.
right there at the
Nobody.
apex, ready to do a Greg
Yeah.
Louganis swan dive into whatever body of water is underneath it? That is interesting because the Chiefs, in spite of all of these close calls, weren't atrocious against the spread this year. I think they might have been one game under 500 against the point spread for the season, which is no surprise for a defending Super Bowl champion because routinely they get overbet in the ensuing year, and now they're back to back. So, but I would actually like to see somehow. I mean, if the Commanders made this a Cinderella story, it'd be awesome. And maybe getting rid of its addition by subtraction, Dan Snyder out. All of a sudden, this is a team that can actually contend, and that'll be a great story. But I'm sort of with you. I think Philadelphia, their defenses, Vic Fangio has done a great job with them. And Jalen Carter, if you bet him to be the Super Bowl MVP, you're going against any kind of trend where it's almost always a quarterback or an offensive player. But if he has 4 sacks in the game, which could easily happen, and we're getting ahead of ourselves because they're not in the game yet. But how far in advance would you start or be inclined to lay down a couple of prop bets, Troy West, with your thirst for degenerate action?
Yeah, I think, even now, I mean, Saquon Barkley, man, this guy's just playing phenomenal right now. And
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts is not playing very well. I mean, Barkley's kind of the guy carrying the team. I don't have the exact odds in front of me, but that's a guy that I would probably look at. Just, you watched him against the Rams. The playmaking ability is just through the charts. The guy can bust one at
Plus
any given
400 to be
moment.
the MVP. Plus
Yeah,
400.
I'm into that. I'm into that. Obviously, you get your obvious ones. If the Bills go, it's going to be Josh Allen, and like you said, if the Chiefs go, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. But with the Eagles, like you said, it could be anybody because Jalen Hurts just really isn't playing great football. He's the one guy that I think could potentially hold them back from winning it all this year.
Anybody that goes to the racetrack knows that the takeout is what kills you. That you might be a decent handicapper, but you're playing into a huge disadvantage, maybe as big as any, because if their track is taking 20% out of the win pool, well, then you have to hit 20% more often than normally would be expected to just break even. You're always finding the juice. We know this is true in all gambling, but when you make a bet like that, where it's plus 400, I mean, if you think about all the different things that have to transpire for him to even get to that point, number one, they have to win this game. Number two, he has to come out of the game in good shape. And number three, in the Super Bowl, then they have to overlook the play of the quarterback, and which would be easy to do if you were looking at the numbers that are being posted by Saquon Barkley in any of these postseason efforts. Uh, but are you playing into like a hole that is unlikely to be overcome? I mean, only getting 4-1 on that. If you think of the number of variables that have to take place, don't they well exceed like a 4-1 payback if he becomes the MVP of the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I would agree. I think at this point you probably wait till they're in the game. I mean, I don't see the odds shifting that much because, like you said, if they do go to the game, the quarterback's going to always be the front runner. And then, like you mentioned, obviously they still have to win the Super Bowl as well. So you got to win two games and got to stay healthy, and you got to outdo the Super Bowl quarterback. So I would probably hold off on 4-1. If I was getting maybe 9-1, 10-1, I'd feel better about it. But that's
Four to
that's
one
a,
seems
that's a
kind of
rough
light,
number.
yeah.
It does seem light for a running back.
And you know, it's like betting the future book in the Kentucky Derby, which people are already doing, and maybe they have a handle on some horse. I mean, there's a great story about these guys. I read a book about these guys that had winning colors pegged from way in advance and bet zillions of dollars at Agua Caliente in Tijuana, and then had to go through the perils of trying to collect, which weren't easy, as the racetrack immediately posted, knowing they're going to have to give these guys millions. All of a sudden they're closed and they're ready to tear the building down. Uh, yeah, I mean that seems like a very small price considering the number of variables there, and yet people will be plunging on this, which is great. I mean, it could be a reason why America eventually just gets buried, and this could be the next financial crisis. People betting, props way in advance of having a chance to actually win. Because if your horse doesn't run and you bet him in the future book, you don't get your money back. That goes up in
Correct.
smoke. All right, Troy. So you've got basketball games for us. I really appreciate that. Going with St. John's, I going with TCU getting some points, and then digging one up out of a dark hole, Cleveland State laying a bunch of points in that game. And you have these amazing programs going. I love following you on social media, and you have all kinds of offers for people where they can get your insight and that of your team. I don't know how many guys you got working in the background there, like 10, 15, it seems like.
Yeah, we're at about eight. We're at about eight, but it's a good group of guys. We even cover golf. I mean, we had the Sepp Straka. I'm not gonna say we had him to win it at the start of the tournament, but we love you mentioned live betting. Live golf betting, we absolutely love live golf betting, Defo. That's probably one of my favorite things to bet. We've got a good group of handicappers. Yeah, you go to the website right now, troywins.com. You're gonna get 7 days free of service, 7 days free. You can follow us on Instagram. Everything's documented. Ran legit. That's It's Troy West on Instagram as well.
Guys do a great job and very, very reasonable. This isn't something where you're gouging a guy for 100 grand, and you give him one
Correct.
loser and that's it. So
Yeah, no doubt. No
then the rest of
doubt.
the season is free. But in the meantime, the guy's flat broke and he finds himself on the streets. Troy, we love you, man. Good stuff. Would you believe what odds would you have given for it to be snowing in Florida this year?
Oh boy, is it actually? Holy smokes! I hear the
Northern part of the
South is
state,
getting
yes. Tallahassee
unbelievable.
and Pensacola, which northern part of Florida. What would it be like 400 or 500 miles from here, maybe less? Um, I should know that, but yeah, snowing. I mean, like 10 inches of snow on the ground, sticking. So
Unbelievable.
yeah, it snowed in Miami once, like in the 70s, and but it didn't stick because earlier that afternoon it was like 85 degrees. So it's great. All right, you have a good time, Troy. Always a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on and joining
Thank
us.
you, Defo.
Your bookie.
Talk to you guys soon.
All right, Troy West, ladies and gentlemen. So he's diving into college basketball. That's great. Going to make a little transition here. Is the football season only 3 games left? And then we'll move on to many other things. Tennis also going strongly. If you're betting, interesting stuff. I mean, if you would bet like we were talking about yesterday, if you would bet Djokovic after he went off the court in the first set against Alcaraz, you had some serious, as the coaches used to refer to as intestinal fortitude, man. You had some guts, you had some balls, you had some chutzpah. And that may be where it's at. We're going to have to really do, as I said, some self-examination and see about changing our betting strategies. But hopefully whatever you're doing is working for you, and hopefully Troy West will come through for you like Scotty M did for us yesterday. Thanks so much for tuning in. For the people at Bet Online, Greenlight Ventures, and NoFilter.net, I'm Jeff DeForrest. We'll see you on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.